Firstly, thank you very much for coming to my show and for your presence.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me.
So I thought to tell about the work that you're doing to my audience.
No, good stuff. Yeah, tell me a bit about what you're doing. I noticed you interview quite a few people on here. There's some videos I want to check out actually. Looks good.
Right now, I'm a DevOps engineer, and
Oh,
uh,
good stuff.
and other than that, I took more than 500 and plus, 550 plus international technology experts and people from different industries and from different parts of the world talking about what they do and how they made things possible. So I do this for my
Cool.
podcast and for my YouTube. Also, I'm a blogger. I
Yep.
do blogging as well, like multitasking.
Cool. Awesome. Sounds a bit similar to what I do actually. I'm also a DevOps engineer. What technology stack are you working with?
Right now, I'm getting trained. Actually, my training is completed. From 23rd, I'm going to start my projects that they are going to make me do 4 projects.
Okay, cool.
So the tools that they taught us is like Jenkins,
Yep.
uh, Docker, Kubernetes, and the basic tools of DevOps.
Cool. No, that's good. Yeah, I do a lot of work with Docker. I haven't done as much with Kubernetes lately because the current tech stack I'm working with isn't a Kubernetes workload. But I still do some infrastructure around that. I'm actually working on something with Linkfree at the moment to migrate the existing infrastructure from DigitalOcean. We're going to have a look at putting it on Civo Cloud and see how that goes. And that's all Kubernetes as well.
So you work with AWS or Azure?
Yeah, yeah. I'm most of my work's in AWS. I primarily work with EC2, RDS, S3, ECS, and I tend to drive it via Terraform. Or a lot of our tech is written in the Ruby programming language, so we also use the AWS SDK that way.
So before that, can you please introduce yourself in detail to my audience?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, my name's Dean. I'm a DevOps engineer from Australia. I work for a company called Operoo. We do school administration software. I'm also a part of the EdiHub community and I'm an ambassador for the EdiHub community. We have a project, the primary project there is called Linkfree, which is an open source version of Linktree, which you're probably familiar with. And the aim of that project is to give people a link in bio while also encouraging them to contribute to open source at the same time. Because with Linkfree, you kind of have to, like, to get your initial profile, you need to submit a pull request and get your profile added that way. It's not the traditional way where you'd create an account and sign in and make your profile that way. You actually have to submit a PR via GitHub to do it, and it's a pretty cool project.
So why you want to be a DevOps engineer?
I didn't actually choose to be a DevOps engineer. I kind of fell into it. I actually started in tech as a desktop support technician, and I worked my way up to network engineering from there. And then from network engineering, I went into a bit of systems engineering and systems administration. And then the next step from there seemed to be DevOps, and that's how I ended up here. I didn't actually learn to code until a couple of years ago. So programming's probably my weakest skill when it comes to that area.
So your previous experiences are more into operations.
Yeah, that's right. I tend to be on the more ops heavy side of like backgrounds for DevOps. Most of the other people I run into in DevOps are from the programming side. So well, it's kind of been good in a way because it means there's been lots of people to like teach me how to code. I think I've learnt to code really quick compared to say how hard it would be to learn the ops side. So I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
So coding, what you know in coding?
Not too much. Well, I sort of just build what I need at the time. I've done sort of bits and pieces in so many different languages. I've worked with PHP, with WordPress and Laravel. I've also worked with Python, say Django, Flask, and Fast API. But I've also just worked with like the current job I have is primarily Ruby. But I also do a lot of Bash scripting, coding for Terraform, and recently I've been using the Rust programming language as well, which is a bit harder, but I'm enjoying it. I've also done a bit of JavaScript and TypeScript stuff as well. The AWS have something called the CDK, which is a cloud development kit, and you can work with that through TypeScript, and I've done that before too.
So right now, how much time you spent on DevOps engineering?
I'm shocking. I tend to work my full day. I'm a full-time engineer, so I do 40 hours a week on that. But I'm probably doing, say, maybe 3 to 4 hours at least of my own stuff lately. So, but like, I don't have to do that. That's something that I choose to do because I enjoy doing it as well. But yeah, I'm definitely putting in about 10 to 12 hours a day lately.
So, what is the requirement and how you match your work with the requirement?
Well, it's not something that's easy to define because every company sort of has their own way of doing things, and like although my title is DevOps engineer, DevOps is more of an idea and culture in the workplace. So DevOps is more of a responsibility of the entire company than say just one person. Like I can't just go into a company and do DevOps without the company being receptive to the ideas of DevOps. Um, it's easy, like say for example, where our application's been around for quite a while. So to get it to play nicely with Docker, there can be quite a few changes that need to happen. Legacy applications can have, say, hard-coded values everywhere, and you've just got to identify them and progressively work them out over time. So then you can get into a DevOps workflow. And it's quite a balancing act trying to do that sort of work while also simultaneously not upsetting the development team too. Because to get DevOps going good in a company, you need the developers to be on your side.
So, what is your mindset that is making you to do your work easy?
Well, I have a great team that supports me. They're really clear with where they want to get things to. They know what to expect. They didn't just go into this blind. They knew that like DevOps isn't an area where you get clear value straight away. So there were months where I wasn't really productive, say visibly to them, but behind the scenes I was doing a lot of stuff. So given that I've got a great team that where I fit in nicely, they like the way I work. That's what drives me to do it the way that I do. Um, I know a lot of people could just sort of come and do the bare minimum, but I prefer to do things properly.
Do you struggle doing it?
Yeah, oh, study, did you say, sorry?
Struggle, tough
Uh,
time.
I did for quite a while actually. I actually got let go from my last job, which it wasn't my fault, but at the time I kind of felt like it was possibly my fault as well. And that was a really tough time because I think at that point I wasn't quite skilled enough to be, say, a lead DevOps engineer, but I was still good enough to deserve to be there. So that spot's a hard one to be in, I think. I don't say I'd struggle now. I think communication with the rest of the team is probably the hardest thing about it. But yeah, I seem to be getting the hang of it after doing it for a little while. But it's definitely not an easy role to fill.
So, how you manage development and operations?
I'm lucky that I'm just interested in computers and technology. there's no actual requirement for me to be able to code to do my job. It does help a lot, and the team love that I can code as well, because it means when they say something or they ask me to do something, I can actually action it myself. Whereas if I couldn't code, I would be, say, at the mercy of when they're available, or it would delay things and block things quite a lot. But yeah, given how much you're expected to know in DevOps, there was no actual requirement for me to have to code. Like you should be able to do this role without being a programmer.
And I
Or
can see, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, go
Well,
on.
and well, in that case, you would probably want more than say one person focused on DevOps. But yeah, you would need someone in the team that does understand the code.
So I can also see how you are a music producer.
Yeah, that's something I did say. Well, I haven't done a lot of it recently. Over the last couple of years, I've been really focused on the tech and the code side of things. But say over the last decade, to even nearly 20 years, I've been producing hip hop music with my friends. And yeah, we've got a few albums out there, and we've done a few decent shows as well, music videos and everything. It's awesome fun, actually.
So how there are two skills in you?
Oh, what's that? Sorry. Or,
Two skills: the music
yeah.
producing.
Well, it's funny. A lot of it's quite transferable, actually. Like, although they're completely different things, it's the same mindset that you need to learn how to be a producer, that you need to learn how to code. Well, I know there's endless amounts of video out there on YouTube that says learn to code and this is why it's hard, and if you can actually do it, then you can probably learn to be a producer too, because it's the same challenges. Like you run into a problem, you sort of figure out how to solve the problem, and then you solve it. And it's just really the same thing with writing music. Is that there'll be a technique. If you don't know how to do it, you go and learn how to do it. And once you've learnt it, you can apply it to your projects. And it's the exact sort of thing with graphics, music, coding and everything, really. Well, that's how I approach it anyway.
So how many projects you are working on as a DevOps engineer?
Too many. I have about 100 projects sitting there that I can forget about for say months at a time, but then I'll come back and revive it and keep going. So I'm actually diagnosed with ADHD as well. So my attention just, I actually find it's better if I don't try to control it, because then I can actually get the benefits of it in one area and just deal with it going wherever it goes. And yeah, over time and as I get older, I get better at managing it too.
So how is shifting from one project to other project?
Well, if it's just me, it's fine. In a corporate environment, it can be a bit challenging. But say for example, where I work, they're quite aware of what I'm like, so they know how to manage it properly. But say if I was in a bigger company or something where you really had to follow the strict rules, I think I'd have a harder time managing that. Well, I don't do the traditional productivity stuff. I do manage, say, Jira cards or stories like that. I know for my actual job, I know it's something that I have to do, so I force myself to do it properly. But in my personal stuff, I'm not organized at all.
So I'm sure the projects will be from different industries.
Yeah, definitely. That mine are all over the place.
So how you are able to connect with it and understand it and
Uh,
get the output?
I kind of just have to wing it as I go. I think I'm lucky that I can learn very quickly. So, given that I've problem solved for so long already as part of my job, if someone comes to me with new information, it doesn't take me that long to get the right sort of path that I need to take from there. Especially with technology progressing the way it is, We have access to tools that just make things like that so much easier than they used to be. Like I can use GPT-3 or ChatGPT now combined with Google or Bing or anything, and I've got access to the world's information right there. Whereas, say, early in my career, I never had that. Like, we used to sit there and we'd have to hunt down PDF files of service manuals for things because we didn't not all the software we used was open source. Like, we didn't have access to the code of a lot of that software. So we had to figure it out like the hard way. The things that we have now just make it so much friendlier. But well, the trade-off with that is that people expect so much more of us now too.
I'm sure you might be very good in doing coding because you are doing so many projects.
Yeah, well, I think that's how I've picked it up because well, coding is actually my weakest skill in tech, I think. It was only a couple of years ago, and I was still avoiding opening the terminal, like because I come from a Microsoft and Windows background. It was always about sort of just keeping the files, and you managed Windows and a Microsoft environment quite differently than you do, say, a Mac or Linux environment. So once I learned the difference there, it made working a lot easier.
So, what is DevOps' role in software development?
Well, DevOps, the role in software development is it's about improving build times, development times, release times, and just overall optimizing the software development sort of life cycle. Previously, I don't know if you're familiar with, say, the waterfall method. Say a client would come to you if they wanted software built, and everything about it would be decided in one single meeting that happened at the start of the project. So as requirements changed along the way, it was much harder to make those changes within the software. Like if you look at a modern day project, we could start building a project and realize we've done something wrong, say less than a month into it, and with DevOps in place, you can very easily pivot the software in the right direction in a way that you couldn't do previously. So that's the kind of value that DevOps brings. It means that everyone in the business and the team knows a lot more about the infrastructure, the code, how the application works. It improves support time and just in general gives the customer a better experience. That's what DevOps bring. Atlassian actually they've got a page that describes what is DevOps, and that's my favorite reference, I think. AWS have one as well, but I think Atlassian's is that little bit better.
So, I'm sure you'll be working with different sizes of the softwares, like the
Yeah,
company, the software which has more traffic and which has less traffic. So, how is that?
it's actually good. Like dealing with that isn't something you get used to until you've been around for a little while. Because I've managed really small sites and they're easy. Like when I first started using WordPress, I thought I was the best programmer around, even though I didn't know anything, just because it never broke because no one ever used it. Whereas say some of these bigger applications that I've managed as part of my work. The company that I worked for previously, they could have, say, 100,000 real-time connections going all at once. And managing that was a lot more difficult and complicated than, say, managing my single web server that I could sort of bring up manually, for example. Like this application that we had it was horizontally scaled, so it was distributed across different data centers. It was using Kafka in the back end, and just everything was really sort of really engineered to handle that workload. Whereas, say, most of us will just be working with a CRUD style model view controller application, and like both are very important areas to know, but yeah, they both take a lot of different kinds of skills to be good at too.
So how is your communication with developers and operations team, and how you manage to get the great output?
My sort of approach to this is to just treat them like my friends. I'm lucky in this current team because that's how we well, that's how it feels to work together. Like I hate the word, say, family when you're talking about employees and stuff like that because that leads down a terrible sort of path. But not looking at it that way, that's sort of how we feel. Like there's no one in my team that would have to worry about how they say something to me. Like I've had people on my team tell me just, Dean, stop talking, and it's nothing personal to me, and I know that it's cool between us, so I just shut up and there's no problem. Whereas I think if you weren't comfortable with your team, you can't do things like that because people might take it personally or they might not know you well enough to be able to do something like that. Because I know that if we're working on something critical, that's not anything against me. It's just that I'm blocking us from actually progressing on what we're working on. So, yeah, just I guess having a good team, it's impossible to do without that. But yeah, just being patient with people, learning how to communicate as best you can. Well, for example, here right now, I'm an introverted type of person, so talking isn't something that came naturally to me. I had to practice and work on this sort of skill. And I've found that being a senior level in DevOps, there's a lot more of this sort of thing than there is actual coding work because you've got to solve problems, but you have to then explain that to people who might not be that technical, and you've got to prove that that's the right thing to do as well.
So how your work starts?
Starts in the morning, or well, I
For any project?
we generally say have a meeting about it. We'll all get together, or we'll even go for a lunch and just discuss it. Get an overview of what we're trying to achieve. We've got actually quite a good process for it. We use an application called Shortcut at the moment. I think that's the name. It's similar to Jira anyway. GitHub projects and GitHub issues are similar, and we'll sort of identify what we need to do. We'll create a story for it that will get assigned to, say, a developer. Depending on the company, they might do. Do you know what sprints are? And like iterations like that. That's how we work currently. But some places don't actually like to do time-based sprints. It can actually, depending on how your team works, it can actually just be more efficient to have a never-ending, say, iteration where expectations are just set and met as you go. Or some other people like it the more common way where we do it in 2 week cycles where we'll tell our customers what's going to be ready in this cycle, and that way they know not to expect it until the end of that cycle. And then it's up to us to have that developed, have it tested, and have it pushed to production so it's ready. And we'll do things like use. Have you heard of feature flags and different tools to do? Yeah, we'll add feature flags so certain percentages of customers can try certain features, and yeah, there's so many different ways to do it. And the other good thing is there's no real right or wrong way to do it. As long as you find what works for you, then it's all good.
Do you have any particular memory that you cannot forget, that can be deploying an application or anything?
I know of others that other people have done. I haven't actually made too many mistakes because I came into the development side so late. Um, where I think, what is there? There's a good one where I accidentally got into a customer's network gear because I thought it was ours. I wasn't supposed to have the credentials, but it turns out that there was a vulnerability in the device and I found it by accident. So I was logged in. I'm like, why? This doesn't look familiar. And yeah, it turns out I was logged into someone else's device. So yeah, sorry about that. You might want to get that fixed. But yeah, other than that, I can't think of too many. There's a good one that I've read about. You might already be familiar with it, but GitLab had someone they hired, and they managed to overwrite the production database, like with the new person that joined the team, when they shouldn't have been able to do that at all. And you can search it up on Reddit. It's a good story about it. Yeah, I don't have any horror stories of my own, which I guess is a good thing. I've done the typical dumb things before, like everyone else has, but the consequences have never been too bad for me, thankfully.
And working on cloud, how it is?
Yeah. I love the cloud. Like, I don't actually use the cloud as much for my own stuff compared to, say, what I do for work. Because with work from home, I don't need my files on the road as much as I used to or anything like that. So personally, I don't use the cloud as much. But for work, it makes everything so much easier. It enables things like working from home. Um, when I worked for a company called Corp Cloud, and that was the last company I worked for that had physical equipment of their own. And we actually did a pretty cool project with them. There's a tool called Digital Rebar by a company called RackN, and we had a physical bare metal server delivered into a rack in a data center and hooked up to our network, and all we knew was the MAC address, and we were able to configure that server properly without ever touching it. And that was pretty impressive. I thought of a dumb one that I did. It was a long time ago. I used to work in the mines, and we had, say, mining villages that were quite a fair distance away, and like you'd have to fly there. You could not drive there. It was just too far away. I was connected to a router remotely, and I shut down the port that I was connected to. And to fix it, they had to fly me up there so I could go and fix it. And all it was a shutdown port. So that's the dumb one that I did. I almost forgot about it.
And having not a great experience in coding, uh, uh, how is that working on DevOps?
It's been fine actually, because I've got such a supportive team around me. Like if as soon as I have a problem on the coding side of things, I've got, say, probably 5 people who I can ask for help, and they're almost always immediately available. I've never actually had a problem. The other thing is I've got tools like GitHub Copilot. Copilot has been really helpful in teaching me how to code. Although it's not always perfect, it seems to be able to give you the right direction of what you need. And from there, I'll just Google the documentation and work it out from there. It might take me a bit longer, but as I get more experience, I'm able to code, say, just as good as everyone else.
So, how many services do you have used in cloud?
Lots. Because I used to actually just spend my time going through and testing out open source software. Like you could probably name almost any problem that people have, and I will know of an open source project that solves that problem. Like I know of thousands of them, like just off the top of my head. So
And I can see you're also contributing.
yeah, I do. I contribute to, say, friends' projects. I do a lot of my own projects as well. I actually have a project called Linux for Pirates, which is a book, but it's going to be written by community contributors as well as me, with the aim of that project being that it's friendly for anyone to get into. There's no consequences if anyone makes a mistake. We actually intentionally broke something, so there'd be issues for people to fix if they want to. I actually have an issue assigned that way at the moment. So it'll be great for getting people into open source. And the inspiration for that came from the community that I'm in, which is EddieHub. And we work on Linkfree, which is another project I contribute to. And I actually chose that one because I don't do front end development at all, and the primary focus of that project is front-end development. I actually like to tackle skills that I don't know much about when I can, just so that when I do end up dealing with them day to day, I know how to do it.
So how many years of experience you have in technology?
Officially, I only started in 2010, but I've been on a computer since I could actually use a computer. I've probably spent like every day of my life on the internet since I got the internet back in 1996. So a long time. And I've
Okay.
probably been studying for about 12 or 13 years, like out of work hours. I would have done that at least, say, once or twice a week.
So you know the infrastructure side because of the past experiences that you have.
Yeah, that's right. That's how I approach things. Is I've just had so much experience that there's not many faults that can come up or problems that I don't at least have an idea of which direction to go.
So what do you suggest to people who are into DevOps? Do they need to come from a operations perspective
You
or
can come from
development?
you can come from anywhere, literally. Like now is the best time to get into it compared to any other time because there's just so much information on how to learn it. The things I'd look for are find a team that's willing to take on. I know it's not as easy as it sounds, but if you find people who are willing to take newer people on that might not, say, have all the experience, you're going to learn more with them in, say, 2 or 3 months than you would by figuring out on your own for years. Like having the right supportive people is so effective. I think that,
So
yeah.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, that would be the most important thing in my opinion, at least, is just, yeah, get a team that's willing to look after you and train you up. Because when I got my first DevOps position, it really didn't go well at all, and I thought it was all completely my fault. But it was that I didn't have a supportive team at all. Like because I didn't come from a coding background, and there was, well, according to the description, there was never really an expectation of coding. Yet on the job, I should have been a software developer, not a DevOps engineer. So that was really quite awful and quite difficult. Um, so yeah, definitely try to avoid that if you can. But yeah, it kind of all worked out, thankfully, at least. But yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
So is there will be any difference in the job description that a company asks from a candidate and the actual work that they do in the company?
Well, yeah, there is a. I find it hard because recruiters only seem to know so much about technology, which means as soon as it gets to the advanced stuff, they just can't really help. So I've had so many different job titles that have basically been the same job even now. Like my job isn't actually that much different to when I had a completely different job title as, say, a systems engineer or systems administrator. Like it's still the same work that needs to get done. It just gets called something else.
So how is working in field and working with computer?
I enjoy it. It is quite fast paced and full on. It's definitely not sort of something you want to do if you want to chill out and take it easy. I'm sure there are options around for that, but yeah, I get up and I'm sort of doing something that's quite productive almost all of the time. But I don't sit around and procrastinate anywhere near as much as I used to in my older jobs.
And you saw the evolution of that technology from last few years, and you are the evidence, and you know how it changed gradually. So, what is your
Yeah.
observation? What is your observation?
Well, I tend to just use the tools that are already there rather than push my agendas. A good example is our current application. We decided not to use Docker at this point, because the way our architecture is, we actually lose a little bit of performance if we go down the route of Docker. So I'm actually really pro Docker and I want everything to be in Docker. But that's an example of where I've actually gone against what my tool of choice would be, because it's a better decision for the team in the long run. So it's better for me to just learn the tools that are already there than to try and change it. Because another good thing in DevOps is that a lot of the tool sets are quite similar. So I know you mentioned Jenkins earlier. I haven't actually ever worked in Jenkins, but I would be confident if I got given a Jenkins project to do that I would be able to do it, because I've used similar CI and CD software before. I've used, say, GitHub Actions, GitLab CE. I think or GitLab CI or whatever they call it. AWS Code Build, Code Deploy, Code Pipeline. What is it? Circle CI. If you've used a couple of them before, you should be pretty confident going in. Like, you'd at least be able to find your way around. You might not be that quick, but you should be able to do it.
So, have you used Ansible?
Yeah, I love Ansible. I don't use it at the moment. There's a person I sponsor who is quite involved with the Ansible code base. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his name's Jeff Geerling. And yeah, he's awesome at Ansible. And Ansible is one of the tools I used quite early on in the infrastructure as code stage. And it's more of an SSH tool. Um, and it achieves a lot of the same stuff that, say, in my current stack, the tool that's closest to Ansible is called Terraform. So if I didn't use Terraform, I would probably look at using, say, Ansible or Capybara or something like that.
And about your time management while using these tools for a project?
I'm terrible with time. So I just sort of make it known that, yeah, don't, well, if something's critical, just make sure I know about it and it's in a special calendar, or otherwise I'll just lose track. Because my problem is, if I'm worried about time, I can't focus on the work and do it properly. So it's better for me just to not worry about it and get the work done, and then I can worry about the time stuff later. So good management helps me there. Like, I actually find that if I try to use tools, say like Trello or a to-do list, I spend more time like playing around in there than I do actually doing the work.
You do research for DevOps?
Yeah, I always do research. I'm subscribed to all the sort of channels you'd expect on YouTube. Say tonight I watched a talk from AWS and another talk from IBM, and that's just on a Sunday, just out of interest that I do. Out of hours, I'll try out a lot of different tools. I work on my own projects, and that's how I do it. That sort of is my research.
What is the main difference working on own infrastructure and working on cloud?
There's no real consequences on working on your own infrastructure. In the cloud, it can cost you a lot of money very quickly. There's a few memes for AWS, like about how if you're new with AWS, you're going to make a huge mistake and cost yourself a lot of money. And if you're experienced, you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to look cooler while doing it. So yeah, you're always going to make mistakes in the cloud, and it can be quite costly. But that's where experience and planning, you're a lot more careful in that environment. Say you're working on your own infrastructure, you've got to worry about the actual hardware when it comes to that. So at home, I tend to use Raspberry Pis. I don't actually have a lot of stuff running at home anymore, but that's susceptible to my ISP going out. So my internet might drop out from time to time, and also the power could go out. Um, if I was a business and I wanted to run my own hardware, you just make sure you're in a building that's got like the right accreditations, and you're using things like a UPS or redundant internet connection or that kind of thing. That's the main difference.
So what will be the time period for any project?
It varies really. I know in my current team, we've got some projects that aren't so strict to a deadline. Like we have a few goals that we want to achieve, and say we don't really know or care how long it takes to get there, as long as we get there by a certain time. That seems to be more effective than trying to do everything to a strict deadline. Because I know when it comes to estimating how long things are going to take, I'm so shocking at that. Like I'll probably say, yeah, this will only take a couple of days, but then in reality it takes me like 2 weeks to do it or something. So yeah, estimation's not something I'm very strong at.
So how you talk to developers or operation team?
We have a Slack channel where we talk together. Primarily, I'll try to use text because then it doesn't interrupt anyone, and they can do what's asynchronous communication, and that way they get back to me whenever they get back to me, and that's the way I like to work. But then we've also got the option of doing huddles, and we have scheduled meetings as well. We'll have a catch up, say once every week for our iterations. We have a DevOps catch up every week with the people involved with that. And we don't do an official stand up, but sometimes we'll jump in and do that as well. I have worked places where they'll make everyone come and jump into a stand up every day, but that seems to be less common, I think.
And you have worked on all different projects. So how is that diversity?
I think that's probably what's helped me out the most is because if I constantly do the same thing over and over, I'm not really learning anything. And I've found diving into so many different projects meant that I get to see so many different types of problems. And if I see something in one project that's done well, then I can also apply that to the current project that I'm working on. I noticed that happened quite a lot when I was working with WordPress, and I sort of moved away from WordPress. I took a lot of the good ideas that WordPress had in my head with me, and I've kept sort of replicating that to this day.
So what are your challenges?
Uh, most challenging stuff for me is well, I'm a full-time parent as well, so I do that as well as work full time, which can mean you don't have so much energy all the time, and people tend to like to organize things whenever you're busy doing something else, so that can be quite a challenge. And for me, I'm diagnosed with ADHD, so that's another challenge that I have. And yeah, I think I'm not great with time management and sort of scheduling. They're probably my biggest challenges.
So I did a master's in software engineering, also bachelor's in
Oh,
computer
cool.
science and engineering. So right now I'm getting trained. This is a 6 months program for DevOps engineer. 3 months is done. It's
Yep,
they trained us all the tools. Now also they said before the prerequisite Linux, also the
cool.
software development life cycle, the traditional way
Yep,
they taught us the present modern day tools.
yep.
Now, from 23rd, they are going to make us involved in the projects, to our Azure projects and to our AWS projects.
Sounds good.
So, how like my education background that I have, how this is going to be helpful for me as a DevOps engineer, and
Well,
is it enough for me to learn everything in the 6 months, or is
well,
this
I think it's definitely a good approach that works for a lot of people. I don't actually have any formal qualifications, so I didn't take that path. But it's DevOps isn't something where you will never be able to learn everything that you could know in DevOps. Like I've been doing this and studying this for as long as I have, and I reckon I only know about a third of what I could know. Like there is so much more, and it's more about being confident enough to tackle problems rather than knowing everything from the start, because there'll be no possible way that you could know everything you need to know in DevOps in that time. What they're probably aiming to teach you is what you need to know to get started properly as a DevOps engineer. So it's more about ideas and the paradigms rather than say specifics and tools. Like you'd get more value about understanding what Jenkins is and how Jenkins works than you would about than you'd get out of specializing in using Jenkins to every little degree. Like that certainly wouldn't be a bad thing, but that wouldn't help you if you ended up somewhere that doesn't use Jenkins, for example. So you want to understand CI and CD, but you don't need to understand, say, GitLab CI specifically, because you'll get, when you're working as a DevOps engineer, you'll have plenty of opportunity to be reading the documentation before you implement. Like we don't just sit here and do, like I'm not in the terminal just running random commands to try and do something. I've really thought it out beforehand. So the actual work is like a really small portion of it. Like the planning and the designing is the big part where you got to get it right.
and Docker and Kubernetes, how these are playing,
Yeah.
and also
Well,
Terraform that you're working on.
yeah. Well, Terraform, they're all what I'd say. They're all just tools. Even to me, a programming language is just a tool. Like, because it can help me achieve what I'm trying to achieve. And I'm not really so fond of trying to know everything about a specific tool, because I could go to work tomorrow and find out that we're not using Terraform anymore. So it'd just, if we're using Ansible tomorrow, I have to learn how to use Ansible. Like that's the way I approach it. And I don't really get attached to tools or care about tools too much. The reason that Docker and Kubernetes are so in focus is containerization is such a big part of DevOps. A lot of software workloads that you're going to run into are going to be containerized workloads. So that's why Docker and Kubernetes are so popular. I wouldn't recommend jumping straight into Kubernetes. Like even I would say I'm only a beginner in Kubernetes.
Awesome. So at last, what do you say to my audience about your work and about your contributions?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that I made the choice I did. I actually quite a while ago, I had the opportunity to pursue music or pursue tech, and I chose tech. And I think it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. Like I absolutely love tech. The work that I do every day is really interesting. I get to work with great people, great tools, great projects, and yeah, like it's led me to meet people like yourself. So I know this isn't officially part of work, but it definitely helps me in my job day to day as well.
So, have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
Yeah, I did actually. After you messaged me, I had a look, and that's where I noticed some people that I actually recognise some of the people you've spoken to. So I've added them to a list so I can go through and check them out.
Uh, I interviewed the vice president of Amazon Web Services, uh, and
Yeah,
also
that's awesome.
a lot of evangelists are going to come to my show as well.
No, good
So,
on you. Good on you for doing that. That's really good.
so as an observer, as a person who is into technology from long time, who knows how to do things and solve problems, what is your observation based upon whatever I said about my educational qualifications and the training that I'm getting as DevOps engineer,
Well,
and also talking with experts like you who are already in the industry and who already solved different problems and who are already involved in different projects, talking with you people, asking these questions, getting answers, and how answers this experience is going to be helpful for me if I work as DevOps engineer.
Well, you're already way ahead of the game because you're not even working as a DevOps engineer yet officially, and you already have an idea of what to expect as you get in there. Most of us would have just turned up to work the first day and just been like, well, what do we do now, basically? But you already know from multiple different people how they do things. You're familiar with the ideas of how to learn the right things. You know not to sit there and worry about little details of tooling and specific version stuff that only, say, experts who would be using that tool every day should know. Um, you know the right people, you know the companies, you know the right stuff to learn. So you're already way ahead, I think. The other point is that there's no wrong approach. Like, say you're doing the school track, there might be someone who just learns on their own, and they're also doing the right thing. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I don't think you can go wrong.
That's a great feedback for me. I will definitely keep in my mind. So anything that you're contributing online that my audience can see and learn from you?
Yeah, definitely check out Linux for Pirates. That's just on my GitHub. It's LOFTWAH is the username, and yeah, it's actually quite good. It's aimed to bring, say, people like yourself who are new and interested in DevOps, um, from where you are to being able to work in the real world. So it covers everything you would need to know, not in like full detail, but you would be able to keep that as a reference to take with you until, say, you don't need it anymore. Because, say, after you've been there for 6 months, you wouldn't need my book anymore because you just know how to do it in a way. You'd be able to write the book after that time.
That's amazing. I'll share your web links with my
Yeah,
audience.
awesome.
Yeah, on my YouTube channel, also on the screen, and also on my podcast. They can see and they can learn. Even one person learns from you from anywhere on this planet. That will be a great
Yeah,
contribution.
exactly. And that's a great attitude to have. All it is, like, I don't actually care if anyone looks at my stuff, but yeah, if I manage to help one person, then I've won. That's more than enough for me.
Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your
Yeah,
permission?
absolutely, sure thing.
Also, can I put on my podcast website,
Yep.
internet, social media,
Yep.
everywhere with your permission?
Anything you want to do with it, all good.
Thank you, Dean, again for your
All right.
time.
Sounds good. I better jump off because it's getting quite late here. But yeah, nice to meet you and thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir.
All right. See you later.
Bye. Bye.